what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, October 2nd, 2017, start of a brand new week, start of a brand new month. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room taking care of issues over there and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And I have to be very, very honest. There are some days when this job just really gets very difficult to do. And today is definitely one of those days, and obviously we've already heard this horrible tragedy in Las Vegas, Nevada, where there was a mass shooting. Last number I had 58 dead, some 500 wounded. Most of the wounded were wounded in the stampeding crowd getting out. And the story is that the shooter was firing from the Mandalay Bay Hotel at this venue where this Route 91 Country Music Festival was taking place, which is a very long distance. And frankly, like so many of these other mass shooting incidents, a lot of people are already asking, is this a staged incident to push the gun grabber agenda? Because there have been so many of these so far. And the fact that my server has been under very intense hacker attack all day trying to keep me off line would suggest there is a linkage there. So moving into it, a lot of questions out there. For some reason, the police are not releasing exactly what weapon the shooter was using. They are saying that he had multiple rifles and handguns in his hotel room, which is interesting. The Mandalay Bay is a gun-free zone. You have to wonder how he got all those weapons into his room past security, and how much experience he had with rifles. And there are some contradictory information coming on out here. Now, the shooter is identified as Stephen Craig Paddock. He's 56 years old. He's retired. He's living in a retirement home. Early witness reports were that there were 3 shootings, possible misunderstanding, a lot of echoes there with all the glass and metal that's going on here. Then the police claimed that they took the shooter down. Now it's come on out he was already dead when they got into the room, and they're claiming, well, he just shot himself. Maybe. And they're out there talking about, who this guy was. He was a white guy, and there was an early report that ISIS was taking credit for this. Oh, it's ISIS. We're going back into Syria. And the FBI has now come on out and said there is no evidence this guy had any links to any terrorist organizations or anything at all. His family in the interview was saying he was not strongly religious. He was not strongly political. He was liberal. He was seen at an anti-Trump rally wearing one of those silly little hats and carrying a sign, but that's hardly an indicator. And the other bizarre thing that's going on is witnesses were saying that there was this, appeared to be this Mexican couple that were running around the concert venue about 45 minutes before the shooting began, saying people were going to be killed, and the security escorted them out, thinking that they were all nuts, and obviously not. Reminds me of that woman who was picked up off a highway saying that there was a plot to kill John F. Kennedy, and everybody ignored her to their eventual regret. But the family of this guy is saying he's just a guy. He hung out. There's nothing in his background that would lead you to think he was going to do something like this. He'd been an accountant. He had a hunting license. He had a pilot's license. But outside of the hunting, he wasn't known to be a major gun enthusiast. His family has no idea where he would have gotten all these guns. We don't even know exactly what gun was supposedly used. All kinds of speculation going on in the corporate media. But his brother is saying he was not really what you would call a gun enthusiast outside of the hunting that he did. And more people are saying there's something wrong here. Now, TMZ.com has an article. Stephen Paddock doesn't fit the mass shooter profile. And again, 64 years old, living in a retirement community. And he's just so ordinary. Now, if this shooting is going to be used for gun grabber propaganda, then obviously this idea that just anybody at all can snap and open fire and kill all these people at a 400-yard range, I might add, would certainly seem to lead to the idea that, well, we have to ban guns from everybody, not just the terrorists, because we never know when somebody's going to go crazy. And by the way, we can already dismiss prescription antidepressants. This guy had no known mental issues. His family and his girlfriend were both saying, no, he was just fine. So I have an alternative theory that has yet to surface in the corporate media. Now, Stephen Paddock was registered in that room overlooking the venue for this concert. Now, let us postulate that the real shooter or shooters simply knocked on his door, said it was room service, got into the room, and then killed him before the shooting even began so they could use the room as a sniper's nest. Then they fled, leaving Stephen to take the blame. Now, apparently Alex Jones is out there claiming that there's a link between Stephen Paddock and Antifa, that, again, going back, there's so much contradictory information. What I want to know is, where are the hotel security camera footage? We really need to look at that. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates rejoining the network. We're talking about this terrible incident in Las Vegas, this mass shooting here. And so far, they're reporting 58 dead. Trump got on TV almost immediately. It's an act of pure evil. Yeah, no question about that. And everybody's out there looking at those videos, and it sounds like fully automatic fire. Now, Nevada is one of the few states where you can own a machine gun. Now, we're not talking about semi-automatic AR-15s. We're talking about full-on machine guns. As long as you pass a very stringent background check, and there is a huge tax you have to pay to the federal government to own the machine gun. And I believe it's thousands of dollars. I don't know. I haven't really had an interest in owning a machine gun. But if he had a legal machine gun, BATF should have a paper record. And if he did not have the appropriate permits, then it was an illegal weapon. So once again, we have the gun grabbers out there screaming, we need more gun laws to deal with a person who wasn't following the existing gun laws out there. And so now all of a sudden Fox News is out there saying, well, maybe it wasn't a machine gun. Maybe it was one of these bump fire accessories like a slide fire stock. And they're trying to come on out there and make it look like everything this guy used supposedly was legal, and therefore the only solution is more restrictive gun laws. And, of course, the question I still have is, how did this guy get all this hardware, 10 long guns, plus handguns, and I don't know why he would want handguns because they would never reach that concert venue. How did he get in there? All right, we're going to take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, hey, Mike, how about, and also mounting, he had mounts for the guns, too, 2 mounts, supposedly, so how did he get all that stuff up unless it was, like, already in there? Maybe the stuff was already in the room.
Or it was brought into the room by the hit team who could walk around security. I'm starting to think more and more this guy wasn't the shooter, that he was just, there in the room, and they left him to take the fall, whoever the real shooters were. Because this guy, as so many other people are pointing out, this guy doesn't fit the profile of a mass shooter.
Well, you got to look at the common denominator. Either it was him or a group that blamed on him. Look at what they aimed at. A country music concert with predominantly white people that love America. So that's the common denominator for either who did it. That was aimed at Americans, per se.
Oh no, not just Americans. I mean, the liberals are already going ballistic over on Twitter about, look at all those Trump voters. They got what they deserve, and they're out there just having a real good time.
Yeah, I believe there was like a liberal college teacher that says they deserved it already.
Yeah.
Didn't that happen the last time?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, it's just sick for them to come on out and say this kind of stuff.
Because they hate, it's a cult, Mike. Like, if it was him, it's liberalism that's the mental disorder, because it's a cult. Look at all the crap they tell you on the news. It's just constant constant Saturday Night Live, and the media is just constantly antagonizing people to go out and do something. You know,
yeah, but this guy was a weekend liberal. He'd go out to the protests. I mean, apparently his girlfriend was much more committed to the liberal cause, and apparently prior to getting together with him, she'd been rather more involved with some of the more intense liberal factions. But the police have already talked to her and cleared her of any wrongdoing. The guy just doesn't fit that profile. And again, when you listen to those videos, it sounds like automatic fire. The problem with the bump stock or slide stock theory is those things, if you're not absolutely trained in the correct way to use them, you're going to get inconsistent fire. And frankly, the cycling rate I'm hearing on that video sounds a lot slower than the AR-15. But then again, nobody has actually said what guns were found in his room. But it did sound like a pretty heavy caliber machine gun was being used, and now they're out there saying, well, he was using high capacity drum magazines. Now there's something that you need to understand about the AR-15. I mean, it's a hobbyist gun. Okay, it's designed for people who want to have an AR-15, but it's not really built for that kind of abuse. Now, yes, you can modify and you can put all kinds of stuff on there, but if you go down to the gun store and you get an AR-15, it's semi-automatic. If you modify it with a crank or whatever to fire auto cycle, you can only go maybe 20, 30 rounds, and that gas tube is going to melt. It's not designed to take that kind of abuse, because why would a manufacturer spend the money to use a gas tube capable of sustaining the temperatures from continuous fire on a weapon that nobody is supposed to be firing continuously? So there's all other kinds of very questionable issues on this. Now, the AR-15's effective range is just 200 yards with the standard .223 ammo. With military-grade ammo, you can stretch to the 400 yards needed to reach from the Mandalay Bay Hotel to the concert venue. But again, nobody's saying what guns were actually found, and that's very strange, because every time there's a mass shooting, if AR-15s are involved, it's headline news almost immediately. So something else may be going on here.
Well, I hope it wasn't the AK-47 or now the AK-74, because they'll blame Putin.
Yeah, they'll blame Putin. Well, they were trying to blame ISIS, yeah, and then when the first reports of the Asian girl came out, somebody said, oh, it was obviously an attack by North Korea. Now Alex Jones is out there saying it's Antifa. And, again, with any major event, everybody is just pounding on board to say, how can I serve my agenda with this?
Yeah, let me drop my ID right next to the, like in 9/11. Found my ID. Hey, Mike, did you hear a report that there was a camera? He set up some kind of a camera to see who was coming down the hallway. Now, who does that? If you snap, you're going to bring 10 guns up, 2 mounting systems, and a camera system. I mean, this thing stinks, Mike. I mean, it just stinks to high heaven.
Yeah, it looks like a professional operation, with the cameras set up to warn if anybody's coming down the hallway. This guy doesn't fit that profile. So there's something else definitely going on here.
And what about not aim at Americans that are patriotic, but aimed at Trump? People who love Trump. You know what I mean?
Well, that was predominantly who was at that concert. Country music lovers, patriots, so forth and so on. And again, the liberals over on Twitter, they think this is great. They think it's wonderful it happened.
Yeah, like I said, we talked to us before. There's a percentage of Americans in our government and in the college world and school world that don't care for their cult, their ideology, Mike. That's just the fact of life. And if people can't accept that, you're living in not the real world.
No, they're not.
Thanks, Mike.
Conservatives build castles in the clouds. Liberals move in. And there lies your problem. All right, thank you for the phone call, Dustin. We're going to switch over to Dennis in New York. Aloha, Dennis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Dennis, are you there? It sounds like we lost Dennis. Can we switch over to Peter in Los Angeles? Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
We got Dennis.
Okay, Dennis,
Mike?
What's on your mind?
Mike, you hit the nail on the head right there. It stinks to high heaven. This whole thing with the guy found in the room. I think somebody else did it, and they killed him and left him in there. He's a patsy. The guy's a patsy. But here's something a little further. They're spinning the hell out of this thing. Fox News is talking about First responders shielding victims by jumping on top of them and shielding them with their bodies. Let me tell you something. First rule of a first responder, do not become a victim, because now you go from being an asset to a liability.
Yes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Situational awareness, that's rule number one, scene safety. And not only that, in a dramatic incident like this, you look for secondary explosions. Okay.
Whoa. Why would there be secondary explosions in a shooting incident? There was nothing at the concert that's going to explode when it gets hit by fire, except, possibly the fuel tanks on the generators.
But evidently, in anything like this, it could be construed as a terrorist attack. New York City wrote the book just before 9/11, Mike, okay? Mm-hmm. It was trained by them. And they talked about secondary explosions or incidents, okay, surrounding after the first one to make more casualties.
Yes,
that's something that's been taught to many first responders nationwide, and I think it still is. I've been out of the loop for a couple of years now, okay? Mm-hmm. But that stinks because they're spinning it on Fox News with these stories, and it kind of reminds me of the thing on the airline, Let's Roll, okay?
Yeah.
All the brave people, and trying to get the public all ramped up. But this whole thing that you talked about with the setup, I think this guy was set up. He worked for Lockheed Martin, defense contractor.
Yeah, and he's former NASA, too.
Yeah, and the girlfriend was in the Philippines. Now, we got to remember also, the Philippines recently are estranged partner of ours, right? We're not, and well, let's see. Could we be using this as an excuse to tie it in and say, hey, we're going into the Philippines. We think this girl was set up with this whole thing, or any number of reasons they could get out of this thing. Maybe she was part of an intelligence network that set him up to put him in that room so that he could be blamed.
She's pretty much been in the U.S. for a very, very long time, and I don't think necessarily that he was put into that room to be set up. I think he just registered at that room, and he was known to be a gambler. And he lived only an hour out of Las Vegas, and it was not unusual for him to drive down to Vegas, get a hotel room, and go gambling. That was what he liked to do for fun. And this Asian woman is his current partner. They've been together for a while. And again, the police have already talked to her, and there doesn't seem to be anything that she can add to the story. So that's kind of where we are. I think the guy was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The shooters needed a room that overlooked the concert venue. He just happened to be in it. They went on in, and they just killed him, set up the room to be the sniper's nest with all the guns and all the mounts and all the rest of that stuff, and the cameras down the hall to make sure they weren't going to be interrupted, did what they did, and then fled, and Stephen Paddock gets the blame.
Well, there's also one other thing that we have to consider also that you usually quote on your program here. Let's look for the distraction. What is the distraction? What's the next thing that's going to happen? Are we going to have further Israeli criminal actions in Gaza or in the Middle East? Are they going to start sending warplanes into Syria? Or are we going to
I would say most likely it's going to be North Korea, could even be Cuba. There are indications that the U.S. wants to basically take over Cuba now and guarantee that it will not be a Russian base for the coming World War.
Yeah. I go with the patsy. I go with the distraction. I still think this is deeper with the people that got in there. I think that the guy was set up as a patsy. And I'm so glad to hear you say that because I've been thinking this all day watching this whole thing. Anyway, thank you, Mike. I'll make room for the other callers.
All right, thank you very much. Here's my question with that. Why set this guy up to be a patsy? He doesn't fit the profile of a mass shooter. He's got no criminal record. Nobody can really milk this guy for any kind of an agenda. I think he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Anyway, we got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the shooting in Las Vegas, and a lot about this does not add up, just as was the case with the Boston bombing or Sandy Hook or so many of these other staged events here. We're going to go back to the phones here. We got a lot of callers waiting on the line. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I've stayed at Mandalay Bay, I bet, 25 times. And like any of these casinos, you have to walk about 50 yards through the casino in order to get to check-in.
Yes.
That's the way to design it, because they want you to stop and, gamble.
Yes.
Everything is under surveillance. I mean, everything is under surveillance. And you wonder how this guy got 10 long guns, even broken down, into this room. It passed the security, and they say he was in the hotel from Friday or Thursday, which means that, room service would have been in there like multiple times.
You mean housekeeping? Housekeeping would have been in there.
Right, housekeeping. Yeah, exactly. Multiple times, at least 3 or 4 times. So there's that. Then like I've also shot M16s more times than I could count, and their cyclic rate of an M16 is about 750 rounds a minute. It was like 12.5 rounds a second. I timed some of these bursts that had, and there were multiple bursts that were near 10 seconds or even 11, and which means that you go through a 30-round clip with an M16 in about 2.5 seconds.
Yes.
And so we're talking about one of those big box, things, or even a belt fed with a saw or something. And since they're shooting downhill from 32 stories up, you can arc that stuff in and easily get that range in from a 5.56. So,
well, I've had people already write on in and say that it sounds like a belt-fed M60, but definitely the cyclic rate that is recorded on those tapes from Las Vegas is way too slow to be an AR-15. There's something else. There's something. There's no. I'm not buying into the M60, but I mean that people are just saying it's not an AR-15. It was something that was a lot heavier, and but there's something.
I agree.
Okay.
Mike, I fired M60s too, by the way.
Okay.
And if you go through bursts like that, like how many they did, either 5 or 6, like 10-second bursts, that'll eat up a barrel on an M60 that it cycles at about 550. So it's slower and heavier, but you can change a barrel really quickly in that, as you can in a saw. But you can't change a barrel on an M16. And it's really
you can, but it's a very long process because you got to take the front mount off and the gas tube off and all the rest of that nonsense. So again, for whatever reason, the authorities are not releasing the specific weapons that were being used. Maybe they're listening to this show trying to figure out what they can claim it was that will pass muster with the public skeptics.
Mike, I think that I didn't even think about it till I heard you say it, but why not that happening? And people coming in there shooting that guy and then lighting up this concert and then getting out before who does put a freaking camera out there? What? Not a single guy. It's a suicide ride for him.
Yes.
I don't understand this. You said something else I saw on the website. They're saying when they immediately came out and looked for ISIS, connections and all that, which of course get into Syria, get into Iran. But the point you made, or somebody made, or Claire made on the thing, is before ISIS, I'd be looking for CIA connections.
I agree. I agree. And there's something in this incident that's staring us all in the face that we need to look at. They're showing all these photos of the hotel at the Mandalay Bay, and there are 2 broken windows. If you look at the floor plan of the hotel, those are 2 different rooms. So that right there tells us there was at least one other shooter.
It's really odd. And how did he blow? I guess did he blow out the window with a charge, or did he shoot it out, or how did he blow those windows out, or were they?
Well, those windows are pretty solid, but if you've got a heavy caliber weapon, you can definitely blast them out. Anyway, listen, Peter, going to have to let you go. Going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with more after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're still talking about the horrible shooting in Las Vegas, and it's just feeling like it's another staged op. either for the gun grabber agenda, or tomorrow they'll find there was a link between this guy and Kim Jong-un or Bashar al-Assad or who knows who. But again, it's just not all adding up. And yes, it's a very cynical time, but no matter how cynical we get, we just can't seem to keep up with what this government is doing in terms of dirty tricks to keep us under their control. We're going to go back to the phones here. Bill in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, my friend. Well, he thinks from start to finish, it's the usual suspect. Again, it's the Mossad. And they always got a way of getting in, just like they run the stock market. They go ahead and, grade off the gravy in their thing, then hand the ball off to some underlings, because the big boys never go to jail. We know that. Well, the same way it's here. This guy was supposed to have had 10 rifles in there. How he's going to fire all of them and reload them and everything. And if the guy was trying to make a statement, wouldn't he go ahead and just shoot down the band members? And or wouldn't he fire on the SWAT team coming down the hallway? He had a camera and everything as a final tribute to going out and getting his message across.
I agree with that last one. I agree with that last one. I'm not going to jump to the conclusion that Mossad had anything to do with this, even though there was that ugly incident in, I think it was Dubai, where the Mossad walked into a hotel, blew somebody away using fake passports. I tend to think this is more of a, shall we say, a domestic production. But you raise a very good point. For this guy, it's a suicide mission. Why not shoot at the SWAT team members? But again, the real issue is, I'm starting to think that he was actually dead in that room before the shooting at the concert even began.
I agree with that, and it really gets me though, because it gets everything off the paper. It gets Trump out from not doing anything for Puerto Rico, and he did everything for Texas, where people vote like crazy for him. It gets Equifax out of there should really be a hot light on those people. They're ruining this country with this hacking going on, and they're the ones that selling us out, Mike. But I'll let somebody else get on, and I thank you for the time.
All right, thanks a lot, Bill. We're going to switch over to Francis in North Carolina. Francis, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha to you both.
Aloha snack bar.
Well, that works. This blows the comment about what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas out the window. So,
boy, that's for sure.
Yeah, really.
They're going to have to change. They're going to have to change slogans after this one.
Yeah, you think?
I think.
But anyway, one, there's rare occasions I disagree with you about various things, but this is one time I actually have to agree with you, because when I saw a snippet of the video and the sound of the gunfire, it sounded like a machine gun to me. So I'm merely a novice to that sort of thing, because I do not have anything to do with firearms for that matter, for personal reasons. But I see the point of people carrying and bearing arms, mind you.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, the only thing I can figure out after what all I've heard so far, and I'm merely quietly observing what's going on and listening to what's being said, but it sounds to me as though whoever the shooters were, they were eyeballing that room, and whoever was going to be occupying that room before they ever got there and do what they had to do deed-wise. Now, on a side note to that, I have a fish to skin. Well, for one thing, obviously that whole crowd of people was obviously a shooting gallery there in that open space or area to start with. That was very very obvious to me, for that matter, the video I saw. One, for someone who is patriotic, they don't have to be wearing a cowboy hat or listening to country music to be patriotic.
True.
I don't.
Same
I have
here.
a different taste in music and attire and everything else. That does not make me any less patriotic than the next person. So, as far as that part goes, that's all I have to say. But, again, I'm still observing and listening to what's going on and what's being said and so forth, to see what actually bowls out. At the same time, I'm also watching the other hand to see what goes down or goes up,
Mm-hmm.
for that matter. Because if there was ever a distraction, this was a doozy.
Well, it's definitely taking it's dominating the news. It's practically all that they're talking about. Fox has now gone on to some economic news, but this diplomatic kerfuffle with North Korea is off the news. Equifax is off the news, as that previous caller said. And again, I'm concerned that the U.S. is looking for a way to get back into Cuba militarily. So who knows what's going to happen? But right now, the gun grabbers are definitely out there, so to speak, full bore. And over at the Huffington Post, they're already out there saying Congress has to enact more extensive gun control, blah, 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 blah. Well, the more gun control you get, the more gun violence you get. Look at Chicago. And if this guy was using a full auto machine gun and he did not have the required federal paperwork, then it was already illegal. And so once again, we have this push to pass laws that limit the freedoms of the law-abiding American citizen and will do absolutely nothing to stop the real criminals, psychos, and terrorists.
This is true. Oh, before I forget, Michael, I can tell you pretty much right now, and this is just my own supposition, is that whatever security security video footage that's in that hotel, that inn, will never see the light of day for the next 20 years, if not 3 decades.
They'll just throw it out the way BBC threw out the raw footage of World Trade Tower 7. And again, it's rather interesting. There's a dearth of real hard information coming out of this. They're not even saying what caliber bullets are being pulled out of the dead and wounded. And so at this point, it's kind of funny. The few things that we should have a definite lock on the facts are not being forthcoming.
Go figure that one out.
Yep.
Y'all have a great one.
All right.
Later.
Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Steve in Texas. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. You always tell us as as Rivero's Rangers to look for what's not there that's supposed to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I've been looking at all day long, and I've had a bunch of my other friends, and I've called them up, there's not one victim with blood on them, okay? I'm not making any weird, oh, my goodness, conspiracies, okay? But I've been watching these people being carried out with makeshift gurneys. Not one person has one drip of blood on them.
Well, remember, most of the wounded were hurt in the stampede. They weren't all shot. There were 58 people who were shot, and maybe a few more were shot and wounded. But the vast majority of the 500 people who were wounded were simply crushed in the mass heading for the exits, or they fell down and they got tramped on. Given the lighting in the situation,
pandemonium.
Yeah, absolutely. Wouldn't you if somebody was shooting at you?
Yeah. I believe it was a 30-30 belt driven, though.
Well, we'll know eventually, or we'll be told eventually what it is. But at this point, I think we can already rule out the gun grabber's favorite object of hate, which is the AR-15. And even the AK-47, the cycling rate doesn't sound good. And again, your normal stock versions of these semi-automatic weapons with the ammunition available to you at the store doesn't really have the effective range. We're talking 400 yards here.
No, it doesn't. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing, everyone just keep looking at videos, keep going over them, and keep looking. All right?
All right, well, thank you very much, Steve. We're going to let you go here. When I talk about looking for what should be there and isn't there, the most obvious absence here is a reason for this particular guy to have gone off and done this. There's nothing in his background whatsoever that fits the profile of a mass shooter. And so there's no motive. He didn't leave a note. And again, I'm starting to feel that he was just a guy who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He isn't even really useful as a planted patsy because there's nothing that links him to Syria or Iran or North Korea or anything. He's pretty much useless. I think they just killed him in the room and left him, and everybody's, jumping on board and saying, oh, this 56-year-old retired accountant, went on out and did this here. All right, we're going to take another phone call and get back to the news. Terry in Oregon, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, there's been a big surge in people looking at Sandy Hook lately.
Yes.
If you go on YouTube, you see all kinds of videos, and they're coming close to the truth. And they want to divert that attention with another one, only this time they want there to be real casualties. There's a big question if any kids were really killed.
Yes, same thing with the Boston. Same thing with the Boston Marathon bombing. So this time they upped the ante, and real people got killed and wounded. But again, no sacrifices too great to keep control over the American people by the U.S. government.
Yeah, and they want people to stop looking at those videos on Sandy Hook because people are getting closer to it, to the truth, and they don't want that to come out.
I think if
let's divert them over to something new.
I think if anything, this is going to have people looking at all of these incidents with fresh eyes and looking for indications that there was a fraud involved in all of these.
Yeah. But this time they want to kill some people, and they did it.
Yes, they did.
Okay, Mike, we'll talk to you next time.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to go to Frank in North Carolina. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, where was the shooter shooting from? I mean, I've seen pictures of, like, 2 windows that were, like, blasted out with, like, hurts blowing in the wind. Is he shooting from multiple locations, multiple rooms, or are those windows in one big giant room that he was staying in?
No, it's 2 different rooms, and it's up on the 32nd floor. But there were witnesses who insisted that there was more than one shooter. And certainly that would, if we're looking at that second window in that second room being, a sniper's nest, then there obviously had to be at least one more person in there doing this kind of stuff. And maybe that second room was empty. We don't really know. And again, there's an absolute dearth of real hard information coming on out from the officials. So at this point, we're just taking...
The woman that was associated with him, did I hear that she had been taken into custody and let go?
Yeah, his Asian girlfriend, and they questioned her, and she had absolutely nothing she could tell him about why or where or so forth. And again, Paddock's own family says he wasn't a gun enthusiast. They have no idea where he would have gotten that many guns. Now, there has to be a paper trail, no matter what state you're in. When you buy, like a hunting rifle or whatever, there's a paper trail. The BATF requires it. And so, again, getting on back to the fact that a machine gun was used, it is legal in Nevada to own a machine gun if you pass the background check, if it was made before 1983, and you get the appropriate tax stamp, which is thousands of dollars. In fact, there is a gun range just outside Las Vegas where you can go in and for a fee be permitted to fire military-grade weapons. But again, if this Stephen Paddock had this machine gun legally, there should be a paper trail. And if there isn't, then it was an illegal weapon, and more gun laws are simply not going to fix that. Now, BATF is already out there saying they're tracing the weapons that were found in the room, which makes it sound more and more like they can't trace them back to Stephen Paddock. So we don't know where they came from.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Now, like I said, the gun grabbers, the liberals are out there. The celebrities are already out there getting their 15 minutes of Twitter fame out there. Emmy Rossum is out there saying we need better laws. In no world does a civilian need a machine gun. So even she's bought into this idea that this guy had a machine gun. Christina Perry, how many more acts of violence? Blah, 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 so forth and so on. Joshua Molina. They're all getting on board this thing. We have to have more laws against guns. Well, that didn't work in Chicago. Chicago has the strictest gun laws in the nation, and they've already had over 500 murders this year. When you allow ordinary citizens to be armed, crime goes down. Now, in Las Vegas, if you have a concealed carry permit, you are allowed to conceal carry, although some hotels will say you're not allowed to bring your gun in here. Now, obviously, with this shooter up at the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay shooting down into this crowded concert, there was no way anybody could realistically return fire, not even the police with their weapons. So it was basically set up to be just a free kill zone here. Now, despite the protestations of the gun grabbers, everybody else is getting the other idea. We need to get a gun and so we can shoot back. And gun makers' stocks have surged because everybody understands this is going to motivate people to start getting personal defense weapons, possibly ones with a little bit longer reach than anything they may currently have. Now, Hillary Clinton, who's out there insisting she's not trying to run for president again, but she's back in politics, couldn't resist flapping her yap about what's going on. And basically, she's out there tweeting, saying, imagine how many deaths there would have been if Stephen Paddock had used a silencer. And with this tweet, Hillary Clinton shows that, like most politicians, she's out there trying to write laws about things she knows nothing whatsoever about. Because silencer is leftist speak for a suppressor. And Hillary Clinton apparently thinks silencers are what you see in the movies, where you put this little tube on a gun, you pull the trigger, and you get a little, and that's it. And no, that's not real world. That's great for James Bond movies. It's not the way things work in the real world. What a suppressor does is it takes the single shock wave that emerges from the barrel with the exit of the bullet, and it breaks it into multiple shock waves that make it impossible to hear, to see where the shot is coming from by listening for the shot. That's what a suppressor does, but it's still noisy. You still hear a very loud noise. But she's out there saying, oh, we've got to ban silencers. Well, shows that, again, we have too many politicians who are trying to write laws about things they don't know anything about. And that's quite a bit different from the early years of this nation, where everybody who was in the government actually had real jobs outside. They knew how to make things work. They knew how to run businesses. They weren't career politicians where being a politician is all they've ever known or done. So the leftists are out there just celebrating like crazy that all these white Trump supporters were killed in Las Vegas. And it really is disgusting to watch it. Over at CBS, their Vice President Haley Greffman Gold came on out and said the Vegas victims were all Republican gun toters anyway. CBS has now fired him. Good. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're still talking about this horrible shooting in Las Vegas, and the story keeps changing. Now the Gateway Pundit is saying that the shooter in that room in the Mandalay Bay had 30 weapons. And again, how does one guy have that many guns and nobody notices? His family was completely unaware that he had any guns outside of a couple of hunting rifles. That was it. So this just is not passing the smell test for me at this point. All right, let's take some phone calls. Jeff in Idaho, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine.
I've been listening to your show for about 10 minutes. I work late at night, and so I've only got the feedback from listening to your radio show. Here's what I would look at is yesterday there was a show, and a person from the mentalmilitia.net, her name is Chrysalis Yandelbeck. She basically talks about the Harry Reid corruption. This guy worked for Lockheed Martin, so we got a tie-in with Comey. We got Hillary Clinton. We got the land deal. We got the Chinese grab. And we got all the stuff that's associated with the October trial again for the Bundys. And they're cowboys. That's the shooting thing. So if people are interested, if they have time after your radio show, is go and listen to Susan Lindauer's show on Truth Frequency Radio and listen to the 2 hours. I think this is the tie-in for what the shooting might be, that this is high-power speculation. It ties in everything that's out in that area. Cowboys, Harry Reid, land grabs, the Bundy retrial, and then definitely a setup shooting for Patsy. This guy may have been an accountant that might have been tied to Comey with Lockheed Martin stuff a long, long time ago. I'm just saying that.
Again, I'm in favor of Occam's razor. I'm in favor of Occam's razor. And again, I'm not the only person out there saying this guy just doesn't fit the profile.
I agree.
And we can.
I agree. Well, all I'm saying is, if you listen to this show, this really ties in a lot of stuff on the globalist plan, how to basically take the West away with Chinese funding. It's real involved.
All right. Well. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch to Alan in Texas. Aloha, Alan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. Yeah, I've just been sitting here, listening and re-listening to the shots being fired. It starts off with a string of about 30 shots. It does sound like possibly like a 30 caliber, a little bit throatier. But then there's a second spat of gunfire that erupts, and there's two different ones going. You can hear one that's a little sharper crack that sounds it might be a smaller caliber, and then the other one sounds like it opens back up. But there's something hit me funny about it when I first heard it was just kind of a hollow boom. There is not the sonic crack like when there's actually a bullet. It almost sounds like blanks to me. To tell you the truth, I don't know.
Well, again, that's kind of hard to look at when there are in fact 58 people who are dead there on the ground. At least that's what we're being told here.
Exactly. I don't have all the sources, so I've not seen, like the guy said before, I've not seen any blood on anyone. I've not seen any, supposed victims of, gunshot wounds anywhere, anyhow. So,
all right. Well, Alan, we're going to have to let you go and take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And I am getting, both from our control room and email, that people have, in fact, seen photos of people who were wounded by the gunfire, and there's plenty of blood for those of you who are into that sort of thing. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. George in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Before I go to my main topic, I'll just say one thing. Hillary and Bill Clinton do have expertise on silencers with their body count. So,
well, they didn't actually dispatch those people themselves personally. They always sent out underlings to do it, and the underlings probably know about silencers. But Hillary's comment about silencers, if she knows about how suppressors really work, then she's just hoping that you don't, that you've bought into the movie image of a silencer being able to actually quiet a gunshot. Nobody's ever succeeded in being able to do that. All you can do is muffle and mute it to make it hard for people to figure out which direction the shot is coming from. And one other thing to keep in mind when everybody's talking about cracks and shockwaves and everything, Las Vegas has all these hard surfaces all around that area. There's going to be all kinds of echoes. So it's going to take a very careful audio analysis to figure out what is really going on.
But anyway, I want to talk about like the unions. The Teamsters down in Puerto Rico, what they're doing, I think it's criminal, what they're doing. And the thing is, it's not the first time the unions have held cities hostage. I mean, I've seen in these big cities where the sanitation workers or the subway workers or the transit workers go on strike. It's like, hold the city hostage until they get their way. And I really think this ain't a really good image for the unions. I'd say that right now, Mike.
Well, we have to be very careful what's coming out of Puerto Rico because there's a couple of different conflicting stories about what's going on down there, and they're trying to blame the unions for not getting the food and medicine out there to the rest of Puerto Rico. Frankly, I would think the union leadership would understand what a very terrible public relations problem that's going to create for them, and they would say, for the duration of the emergency, let's deliver what we're supposed to deliver. But there are other sources who are saying that this lady who runs Puerto Rico is very much a Hillary fan, a Hillary friend, and she's trying to make Donald Trump look bad by saying that the U.S. isn't doing enough for Puerto Rico by blocking the stuff that's on the docks. And we do know the stuff is piling up on the docks. There's another story that's coming around saying that the Clinton Foundation is already neck deep in Puerto Rico, the way they were in Haiti. And the reason they're blocking all the food and medicine and everything is what they want is a big chunk of cash to be sent in that they can siphon off the way they did in Haiti. So we have to be very careful. We don't really know what's going on. One of the stories I heard was that most of those truck drivers want to be out there delivering materials to the interior of the island, and they're being coerced to not move, and they're not happy with it.
Well, the thing is, too, this happened prior to the Bolshevik Revolution, that political hacks, the communists, the people by the robber barons, to sort of like blame the Russian Tsars. They did screw with food distribution, which caused a lot of famine in Russia.
Yes.
Bolshevik takeover.
Yeah, the weaponization of food.
Yes. But anyway, Mike, I'm going to let you get back to your show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now, there is an article out here. This came out of the Duran.com, and it raises the question about the mass shooting problem, like organized terrorism is a drug problem, talking about the well-documented links between violence and prescription antidepressants. It does not apply in this case. Nobody has given any indication that this Stephen Paddock had any mental health issues. And he wasn't on antidepressants. He was just a normal guy. You know, Hunter ex-NASA, I probably would have hung out with him. And his family is just flabbergasted. And it's sounding more and more to me like this guy was just in Las Vegas for a weekend of gambling with his girlfriend, and he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And he got left behind to be the patsy. I don't think he was set up deliberately to be the patsy, because as a patsy, he's pretty much useless. He doesn't have links to anybody that the U.S. government wants to attack. All right, so we're going to move on from that story now, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more information surfacing. But again, the hard information, exactly what guns were found in the room, whether or not Stephen Paddock's fingerprints were really on them, whether it was GSR on his hands or bruising on his shoulder, that's not coming on out. None of the doctors are saying what caliber slugs are being taken out of the bodies of the injured who were shot or the dead. So that just, it's not passing the smell test. This Stephen Paddock just does not come across as the mass shooter type. He's retired. He's living out his life. He's having fun. Now, meanwhile, Antifa is getting really active all over the country, all over the world, in fact, and apparently over the weekend, Antifa blocked the 101 freeway in downtown Los Angeles, holding up these placards that read, "November 4, it begins." So they're trying to ramp up here to this idea that Antifa is going to start some kind of a civil war or insurrection to drive Donald Trump and Mike Pence from the White House. I note rather pointedly that they're not seeing who they want to put in to replace them. But I suspect the initial H will figure in there. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Sean in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Perfect timing, I guess, because that's exactly what I was calling about. I joined kind of late, and I didn't know if you got wind that Antifa was making this promise on starting a revolution on the 4th.
Yes.
And I don't know if the shooting or anything's correlated to it. But
well, Alex Jones seems to think it is.
Yeah, I can see that. Alex actually, he's suspecting that to be a bogus date. He actually thinks that they're going to try to kick this thing off like mid-October.
Who knows?
Apparently, from what I heard, is they actually had people infiltrate the meetings of Antifa, and that's how they got this information, you know, like Project Veritas style. So, yeah, and, you know, everybody wants to bash Trump and everything, and everybody needs to realize we need to back this president, because what's the first thing you heard this morning? Who's Hillary blaming for this shooting? She's blaming the Second Amendment.
Yep.
She's blaming you, the American people. It's your fault that you have gun rights that this happened.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what the liberals are using this to push the gun grabber agenda. The problem is, in order to repeal the Second Amendment, it's going to take another amendment. So it's not just a matter of Congress passing the bill and the president signing it. It still has to be ratified by 3/4 of the states.
Yeah, but it's such a ridiculous claim. I mean, if they get your guns, you're not going to have anything to fight this type of thing back.
Well, I mean, that's the real point here. The U.S. government is concerned.
Exactly. They want to disarm you so you can be victimized real easy.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, any dictatorship in history, they will disarm their population so that they can't stand up and fight back, and that is precisely why the Founding Fathers gave us that Second Amendment, to hold abusive government in check. And the idea is not that we're going to have an armed revolution in this country, but if you have a balance of forces on both sides, everybody's going to be reluctant to pull that first trigger. And that's what keeps the peace. But obviously, as we move along toward this global new world order, part of that agenda is global disarmament. The United Nations has been pushing that for years now, that nobody but the military and the police should be allowed to have any firearms whatsoever. And it does seem like, looking at what's coming out from the media and on social media, that this is being exploited for the gun grabber agenda. Just like Sandy Hook was, just like Columbine was, and just like Sandy Hook and Columbine, it doesn't really feel like this was a real event. In terms of, it's not as we're being told it was.
Yeah, that's true. But you also, I noticed, right after Obama and Trump took office, all these sporadic group shootings kind of stopped all of a sudden until yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you, Mike, if they're successful at this, and they do indeed, if you get some kind of organized mass shooting from Antifa to kick off this civil war, where do you see this thing going? What do you think? Do they have a good chance in succeeding, or do you think otherwise?
I think my preference would be, remember how Antifa and all the, well, they weren't called Antifa back then, but the liberal snowflakes, after Trump won the election, and they were rioting all over the country, including cities that Hillary won, and they were causing all this damage and saying, we won't have Trump, we want Hillary, blah, blah, blah. And it kind of fizzled. They just didn't have the number of bodies out there to represent a significant force. They made a lot of noise, they caused a lot of damage, they injured a lot of people. Personally, when you're talking about, literally overthrowing the government of the United States of America, you're talking about Antifa is setting itself to go up against not just the police and the National Guard, but ultimately the military. If it's deemed a civil war, the U.S. military will be on that other side. So I don't know what Antifa thinks they're going to do, but I don't think it's going to end with Trump and Pence stepping down.
Well, from what I understand, Antifa is supposed to be like a smoke cover for their plans is to also implement this MS-13 gang that's running rampant on the West Coast.
I've heard that they're working together, and who knows what allegiances the Antifa people have come up with. I mean, at heart, basically, they're communists, because fascists and communists are polar opposites to each other. Okay?
Just hope for the best, I guess. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, well, that's going to be kind of hard to do. Thank you for the phone call, Sean. We're going to let you go here. All right, getting on back to Puerto Rico, we're seeing all these articles about how the supplies are desperately needed, but they're just piling up on the docks. They are not being divided. There's a lot of finger-pointing going on. They're, like I told that caller, blaming the unions. This is the government of Puerto Rico trying to make Trump look bad, may even be possibly pushing for full statehood, exploiting this. And the Clinton Foundation is down there as well. Interestingly enough, now that Donald Trump has waived the Jones Act, and ships and planes from other nations can land there after picking up supplies on the mainland U.S., Jonathan Brown is a businessman over in Britain. He set up his own smoked salmon company when he was 16, and he lives in Miami now under the name the McKnight Food Group. And he basically has chartered 5 aircraft to take supplies, not to Puerto Rico, but to Dominica. People tend to have forgotten just how badly they got crushed by Hurricane Maria. The damage is not confined to Puerto Rico. There's a lot of suffering going on down there. Now, Russia Today is out there saying that with regret, they may be forced to stop broadcasting in the United States due to pressure from the U.S. authorities. And basically the worst case scenario is that the American media is allowed to say whatever they want. Russia Today is being demanded to register as a foreign agent, along with their sponsoring their host company here. Now let's get on over to the war zones. By the way, Russia Today is one of the really good sources for information as to what's really going on. Let's take a phone call. Alex in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, I don't know if I missed you covering this earlier. I just tuned in, just got out of work. But anyway, it's so funny how these terrorist acts always happen like the day after a big vote in Spain, or you know what I mean? It's like now the media doesn't have.
Well, you know, that's certainly one of the things the media doesn't want to cover right now is just how brutally the Spanish government came down on the Catalan independence referendum, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit later in the show.
Yeah, and not only that, just how massive the victory was. I mean, it was a huge victory for those who came out and voted.
Oh, yeah, slightly above 90%. And apparently the government of Catalan has already issued a declaration of independence.
That's right. We're all sick and tired of the bankers' rule.
Yes, we are.
It's a world establishment, and we're sick and tired of it. And it's like a Brexit vote, and it's like a vote for Donald Trump. They don't want to talk about that. And I just find it amazing that kind of, like, the shootings the same night as that. I mean, it happens it's too ironically that those things happen on big days for the independence people, you know?
I think in this case it really is just a coincidence. Maybe not, we're not sure, but it's, you know, I mean, there's only so many days in the year. And there's a lot of stuff going on right now, so some of it's going to line up. I don't think Catalan was a primary motive for this incident in Las Vegas. At this point, it does look like this is yet in another very long series of government hoaxes to push the anti-gun agenda.
Yeah. Well, you are also the one who always says that people that are assassinated for more than one reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think that, you know, maybe they had this planned and they decided to go ahead and put multiple fronts on it and covers for it, you know?
Well, certainly everybody is exploiting this for whatever their own personal agenda happens to be.
Yeah, I don't know. It's amazing that it happened the day of the election in Spain. I'm sorry. I just find it to be amazing.
I don't think that there's a strong link. Maybe. I don't think so. Anyway, listen, thanks an awful lot, Alex. We're going to let you go.
Thank you, Mike.
All right.
Thank you, bye.
All right, the phone lines are open here. Now then, getting on to the war zones, because there's a lot still going on besides Las Vegas. And by the way, you probably have already heard, flags are ordered to half-mast until this coming Sunday for the victims in Las Vegas. So there we are on that. Now then, Russian airstrikes have killed more than 2,000 ISIS and al-Nusra terrorists in Syria in the last 11 days. It really is all but over there in Syria. The only thing that would turn it around is if they find an autographed photo from Bashar al-Assad in Stephen Paddock's things, and I don't think they're going to do that. Or they carry out a decapitation strike on Assad. And we're seeing indications that maybe the decapitation strike is becoming a favored tool because they're starting to talk about that against Kim Jong-un again. Now, speaking of Korea, something interesting happened over the weekend, and certainly they would rather you weren't thinking about it. Saturday, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson confirmed that for the first time, despite all this ongoing rhetoric and bellicosity, the State Department had opened up direct diplomatic communications with the government of North Korea. And that's the good news. The bad news is North Korea came on back and said, well, we appreciate the call. We're not really interested in anything that you have to say. And this was their very polite way of saying that they doubt the U.S. government would keep any promises that were made for surrendering weapons of mass destruction based on what happened in Libya, which surrendered its nuclear weapons program and still got attacked. Syria, which surrendered their chemical weapons, still got attacked. Iraq, which surrendered their chemical weapons, still got attacked. And Iran, which has surrendered its nuclear weapons program, and now Trump wants to kill that deal in order to launch a war. So basically North Korea came on back and said, we appreciate the call. We have no reason to listen to anything that you've got to say. Well, that's a horrible slap in the face. So now Donald Trump is out there saying Tillerson was wasting his time. You know, we don't need to talk. We know what we have to do here. So Trump is trying to save face here. He's trying to make it look like cutting off communications with North Korea was really his idea, when it wasn't. We'll be back in a few minutes with a phone call and more about Korea. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to take a phone call. Kathleen in Paris. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi.
Hi,
Michael.
you're on the air.
Okay. I was calling about listening to Paul Craig Roberts' message this morning. He was on a radio talk show and talking about the fact that Putin is not stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And that he could easily see the pattern of defaming a leader. There was, Saddam Hussein in Iraq, and then there was Gaddafi, and then they tried it in
now
Syria.
Kim Jong-un and his teen sex slaves and all the rest of that.
Yeah, and it hasn't worked yet in Syria, but and it's usually countries though that can't fight back. So I don't know. Would you think that would rule out Russia, and that we're really going to be focused more on Cuba and Iran? He's thinking that Putin can only think though that he's next.
Well, I don't think Putin thinks he's next, but I think Putin is realizing that he is somewhere on the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list. Because ultimately, this is a war to reassert the Bretton Woods Agreement on the world and force every other nation to continue to go through the U.S. dollar for all cross-border trade and banking, off of which the Federal Reserve and Wall Street would make a small piece of the action. And they want to go back to that because this nation has pretty much lost most of its manufacturing. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. There is nothing else other than other countries using our currency to keep our economy going.
Well, I don't know if I missed some news cycle, but how is it that Pence is out too if Trump goes out? I thought they were after Trump, but that Pence would be the president.
Well, Pence would be the president, but Antifa is saying they want both Trump and Pence out. But again, that would make Speaker of the House McConnell the president. I mean, there's a long line of succession. But again, if Antifa is really out there talking about putting Hillary into that Oval Office, and I'm sure she wouldn't turn them down if it was offered, they're talking about literally going up not just against Trump and Pence, but against the entire structure of government itself.
And Antifa could say something like that? Who are they?
Well, that's a very good question. We know that they're being funded, at least in part, by George Soros and some of his non-governmental organizations. We know they're very sympathetic to Hillary and the liberal agenda. Again, being anti-fascist, by definition, that makes them communists, which tends to be aligned with the liberal far-left agenda.
That would imply some clout to be saying we want Pence out too.
Well, they're literally threatening a civil war. I don't know how far they're going to get with it, but at the very least, they could give Trump an excuse to declare a national emergency, martial law, and suspend the Constitution. It's a very fragile situation here right now, and I'm very disappointed. I'm very disappointed in Trump, obviously, but I don't want to see a civil war in this country, because certainly if Antifa gained control of our country, things are going to be a lot worse than they are right now.
I must have missed some other cycle. Cuba, how did Cuba get back in the on the list?
Well, I'm responding to all this stuff that they've been building up for the last couple of weeks about how Cuba is using sonic weapons against our diplomats, which of course Cuba denies. And the idea that Trump is pulling back from the normalization of relations that Obama started, and now they've withdrawn their diplomats, and it's starting to go back and look like back before the Bay of Pigs, where the State Department is urging Americans who are currently in Cuba to get on out. And I think the thinking is, even if Cuba normalized relations with the U.S. government, that doesn't mean they would break off their existing relationship with Russia because of the many long years going back to the Soviet Union where Russia was their friend and support in this country. So the thinking is, in order to prevent Russia from having a military foothold in the Caribbean, we're going to go ahead and just take over Cuba. Anyway, we've got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, Kathleen. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we go to the phones here, Natural News is reporting that many witnesses who were on the scene of that shooting at that Route 91 country music concert were saying when the shooting started, nearly all the exits were blocked. And that's probably why so many people were injured, because the people behind were pushing forward trying to get on out. The people near the exits couldn't get out, and they wound up being crushed. And something that was very obvious on the video as well, if you look at the video of the musicians playing, just when the shooting starts, and the musicians stop, and the stage lights, the set lights go off, and then all of a sudden there are all these bright floodlights that light up the audience. Now, maybe they were being lit up to help guide them to the exits, or maybe somebody just decided, let's light them up a little bit for somebody to be able to see more clearly what's going on. But this story is just feeling so iffy right now. All right, back to the phones here. James in Ohio, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I haven't heard anybody mention this much, but the earthquake in Mexico City brings up an idea that Mexico City isn't really built on great geology. It seems to be sinking, and it also doesn't have a nearby water supply, so its water is piped in from far away.
Well, that's been known for a long time. Mexico City was originally an island in the middle of a lake. Back during the time of the natives, and then over time they just filled it on in and they built on out. And yes, it's absolutely the worst kind of terrain that you should be building on if you're in an earthquake zone.
Well, it seems to be sinking or shifting, and the water pipes are failing, and the poorer people there are already spending a ridiculous percentage of their income on water that they're trying to truck in. So with this earthquake, I imagine, a city of 20 million people, that's going to be a potential source in the near future of millions of immigrants. I don't know where they're planning on going, but I imagine the United States would be a prime target.
I can imagine that as well.
I also want to ask you your bumper music, the one that outlines the legitimate roles of government. I was curious who sung that and where I might find the whole song, because I know a lot of people who would really enjoy listening to that.
Well, if you go over to the website wrhradio.com, that's the website specifically for the radio show, and halfway down the page there is a link to a player where all of the music that is or has been used on the show can be listened to in its entirety, and most of them have links to the original website of the artists who graciously gave us permission to use their music on the show. Much of it actually was written by my wife, Claire. I'm having trouble remembering or figuring out which song specifically you refer to.
Secure the blessings of liberty for
ourselves. Yeah. Well, that's the preamble to the Constitution. And
right.
Yeah, and that's Tom. I'm trying to remember his last name who recorded that, but you can find that at wrhradio.com. Halfway down the page, it says "Listen to the music from the What Really Happened radio show," and you'll find it all there. Okay.
Also, I wanted to say that I haven't been able to donate lately because of a medical situation that came up, but I will resume that, and I advise everybody out there, if you can only donate $5 a month or whatever, go ahead and do it.
I would appreciate that greatly. We're running on fumes over here, and it's especially with all the hacker attacks on the server, I've had to buy some additional software to try and head it all off. So, anything that anybody can do to help, we appreciate it, and I know I do that commercial to donate to RBN, but I should have done a postscript on there saying, don't stop donating to whatreallyhappened.com, because we really do need it and appreciate everything that comes on in. And if you donate and you do not get a thank you, I want to make this point. If you don't get a thank you, there's been some kind of a problem. In some cases, when I get donations by mail, the return address is scrawled so badly that I'll mistype it, and the thank you notes will come back to me. So if you've made a donation and you don't get a thanks, paper gets paper, electronic gets electronic, and sometimes those will bounce back saying the mailbox is full. But if you don't get a thank you from me, it doesn't mean I didn't get the donation, and doesn't mean I'm not grateful. It just means there was some kind of a technical issue, which email out here right now, ever since Spectrum took over Time Warner Cable, there's been all kinds of problems. They've made changes to their emails, to their SMPTE server, without really informing the customers, and we went through about 3 days there of not being able to send mail.
All right. Thank you for your time, and keep up the good work.
As long as I possibly can here, we're going to switch over to David in California. Aloha, David. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
You there?
Yeah, I'm here. You're there.
Hello, Mike. Okay. Well, there's that little swish, and then it's just silent sometimes. I think it's a latency issue. I just wanted to say right now that we lost one of the biggest luminaries of rock today in Tom Petty. He died today.
Yeah, I saw that. I did.
And oh, my God. And it's just, I don't mean to change the subject. I know you got, this Vegas thing's pretty powerful stuff, but I just had to tell you that and tell your listeners. And I'd like to know what in the hell's going on with all these great rock people, singing players that are dying under the age of 70 or around 70. It's just...
Well, the rocker culture, live fast, die young, leave a good-looking corpse here, and we don't know what Tom Petty was doing in his private life. May have just been bad genes, may have just been the stresses of being on the road all the time. It's not an easy lifestyle to be out there with a rock band.
Yeah, I'm a former rock star, so I know.
Okay.
Mike, thanks.
All right, you got
Ides of March. I used to be in that band. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I remember that one. I remember I had... during one summer in college, I took the summer off, and I actually was part of a rockabilly band. I played 5-string banjo and guitar, and we toured around Southern California. That was rough, and I just decided that really wasn't for me, and so I went on to do what it is I wound up doing. So
something easy like what you're doing now, right?
Well, what I'm doing right now is a lot worse, and I wish I could stop.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I do not see the end of the need for what Claire and I are doing, and it's.
No, I know you.
Yeah.
You fill a great niche, Michael, and God bless, and take care and be well.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot, and I'll have to dig out my old Ides of March albums now. Wow, I got a rocker as a fan of the show. Thanks for the call, David. We're going to switch over to Milton in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, aloha, Michael. I just purchased a couple firearms myself to be prepared. My thinking is if Antifa's around the corner, I wouldn't go out to confront them. It's just for protection. And that's just a statement. But my real question is, what would a civil war look like, and who would I know who's my enemy I would have to defend against?
Well, at this point, as I said before, as disappointed as I am in Donald Trump and in the federal government, I do not like the idea of a revolution or a civil war. And so, from my point of view, Antifa, or for that matter, anybody who wants to overthrow the government by force, I have to view as the enemy.
Okay. Yeah, but it could be my neighbor, correct?
Well, it could be. I mean, during the Civil War, I mean, you had families that were divided by that, where you literally had siblings, cousins, nephews on both sides of the conflict. In my family tree, I have ancestors who served both the Union and the Confederacy.
All right.
Robert E. Lee, who was the Confederate general, when the war was starting up, he was offered command of the Union armies, and he decided that his loyalties were more with Virginia than with Washington, D.C.
Okay. Yeah, so it's a lot more complicated than I thought.
Well, it's going to be a lot more complicated because the new Civil War is probably going to be more of a guerrilla war than what you think of as the Civil War with your basic, line ahead marching against each other style combat.
So stay out of crowds, right?
Yeah, really.
Okay. I think you did enough for me, buddy.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Getting on back to the issue of North Korea. North Korea is acknowledging that the UN sanctions are causing a tremendous amount of harm to civilians and reasserting that this will have absolutely no effect on their continuing development of long-range missiles and nuclear weapons. So it's a standoff on there. Very alarming story coming out of InfoWars. President Trump appears to have settled on a military solution in North Korea. And this is going to be very, very tricky because I have absolutely no doubt that by now Kim Jong-un has dispersed his available missiles and warheads. In fact, there was even a story from last Friday where they were confirming that missiles that had been stockpiled near the factory were now being taken out and spread across the country. The fact of the matter is, and this is very troubling to South Korea and to Japan and to Guam, the United States cannot actually guarantee to go in on a first strike and not have some kind of a retaliation against the U.S. allies in the region. Now, they may be talking, again, a decapitation strike against Kim Jong-un himself, but that leaves open the question of who is going to replace him as leader of North Korea, and are they going to be more pliant towards the United States? But again, what we're seeing in North Korea is the end result of the duplicity of the United States government, which keeps going to all these countries and saying, really, you have to give up your nuclear chemicals, your biological weapons, your chemical weapons, and we promise everything's going to be fine. And it doesn't happen. Libya shut down its nuclear weapons program. Libya gets invaded. Syria surrendered their chemical weapons to avoid invasion. They still got invaded. Iraq surrendered their chemical weapons to avoid invasion. They still got invaded. Iran has shut down their nuclear weapons program. They shipped all of their enriched uranium up to Russia. Now Trump wants to pull out of that deal. And war hawks like John McCain are already out there saying, bomb, 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 Iran, bomb, bomb. It's almost a little bit sick out there. But apparently that's the reason Trump pulled back Tillerson, saying, I've already decided we're going to do this the hard way. And if there is a backlash, Trump will bear the burden for any damage that comes down in South Korea, Japan, or Guam. And don't forget, China has said if the U.S. attacks North Korea without provocation, China will feel obliged to intervene. That risks war between the U.S. and China, and I have no doubt Russia would not hesitate to come in on the side of China. All right, we're going to take another phone call here. Anthony in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Just really quick regarding your comments. I have some other comment regarding the Vegas shooting. This involvement, again, is the topic that I tried to tell you earlier about the corporations controlling politicians.
Yes.
And the presidency. And so that's my comment. Anyway, getting on to the Vegas shooting, I really think that there should be an investigative body within our own government that's comprised of citizens like you and I, and politicians like Ron Paul, to investigate these shootings. You know that happen. What do you think?
Well, obviously the government doesn't want private citizens poking around in its business. That's why they're attacking the independent media, and they're certainly not going to invite them to come into their midst unless they're already compromised going on in. The reality is that we, the American people, have to stop this idea that if we can just get one more government investigation into, for example, 9/11, that the truth will come out. No. As long as it is the government that is investigating, the truth will never come out. There have been a few exceptions. When the House Committee on Assassinations based on audio data from Dealey Plaza, Texas, did have to admit there was more than one shooter in Dealey Plaza, and yet immediately after they, the official story was, well, the audio data was faulty, it was a lone assassin, blah, 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 blah. They will never admit that they have lied, because then the entire tapestry of lies that have kept us all blinded through the decades would unravel. And one of the problems of our government right now is they're carrying the accumulated burden of 200 years of lies, frauds, and deception that they have to continue to maintain. Now, after they go off about 100 years ago, they're willing to say, well, yeah, all right, there wasn't really a Spanish mine in Havana Harbor. But for certainly the more recent lies over our lifetime, yeah, they will stay protecting us. A lot of people are wondering if we're really going to get the honest documents about John F. Kennedy's assassination, which are supposed to be released later this month. And some people are asking, have they already been sanitized, or will Trump move to simply block them?
But, Mike, if there is no an investigative body to investigate these, these incidents, then it's left up to our government.
No, it's not up to the government. It's up to us. We're our own investigators.
Well, it's up to us. I know that, but
okay.
I understand that. But the independent media, is not sizable. Is not as sizable as the mainstream media, and the message doesn't get across to the rest of the American people, because of course we're all being dumbed down and made to be compliant.
Okay, well,
so
Anthony, Anthony, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're coming up on a commercial break here. First of all, most Americans aren't watching the corporate media anymore. They're coming to the internet and the independent media. And the American people, there is no way the guilty will ever be punished for what they've done. I mean, we're in our second Attorney General and head of the FBI in a row who are still working to protect Hillary Clinton. But that really doesn't matter. What matters is the American people come to understand the true nature of that central federal government and how corrupt it has become, irretrievably so, and we start making our decisions about the future based on that. Are we going to continue to support a government that behaves like this? Are we going to ever trust them again with anything that they say? Are we going to allow them to take our children to be killed and crippled in more of these wars of conquest? And that is really the important point.
One quick comment, okay? Before you let me go, why can't concerned citizens get the Attorney General to investigate this shooting, to bring out all the facts that you and the independent media say, like InfoWars?
Well, if the Attorney General is just as compromised as the rest of the government, what point is there? Anyway, Anthony, got to let you go. Got to take a break.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And Fox News is now rerunning the interview with the brother of Stephen Paddock. This is Eric Paddock, and basically out there saying that it's just a regular guy. Not strongly religious, not strongly political. They had no idea that he had or where he would have gotten all of these guns that are now claimed to have been found in the room with him. So far, nobody has actually found a link to say that those weapons belong to Stephen Paddock. That's another gap in the official story. And we know how the official story can be made to work for the perpetrators. Remember Lee Harvey Oswald, accused assassin of John F. Kennedy, and a big problem they had was Oswald's fingerprints were not found on that Mannlicher Carcano rifle. It was dusted for fingerprints twice. And all of a sudden, 2 days later, they just decide, for the heck of it, we're going to try and dust it for fingerprints again and find a complete Oswald palm print on the barrel. So these things get done rather underhandedly. Another phone call, Charlie in Los Angeles. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I'm not interested in the details for this. I listened to those bullets, and those are blanks. You do not hear the bullets hitting metal, steel. You don't hear any ricochets. I mean, you watch Gunsmoke, you see more realistic gunfights. And how did they get everybody to the hospital?
Well,
did they use taxi cabs and Uber?
We have no idea. Okay, Charlie, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. And again, We know the government likes to fake things, but there were so many witnesses around there who saw people getting killed. And again, there are photos now, apparently over at TMZ, they got a whole bunch of them, of the dead and wounded with lots of blood. And so at this point, we're going to start seeing the propagandists try and junk up the story to keep us confused, like the no plane at the Pentagon story, or the Umbrella Man and the JFK assassination. It's called poisoning the well, and we just need to be on the lookout for it. Roxanne in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. Well, I was listening to Broadcastify on YouTube. They have the police scanners for this event last night. Is it going down the way? You'd have to listen to it because the operators telling the cops to calm down. They're trying to get up. You know, it's quite hairy.
Yeah, it is.
So, did somebody get hurt? Yes. Was it this guy? Was all of that? I don't know. But just to listen to the scanner when you get time if you want. That's it. Have a good day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And, yeah, it can be very hard to listen to these things when they're actually happening. I understand that there was actually an off-duty Las Vegas police officer just enjoying the concert, and he is one of the people who got shot. Apparently a lady from Tewksbury in Massachusetts was also in the crowd. So we're going to see these victims literally all over the country. We have to take a break for station identification. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, normally at this point in the program, I'd be doing the economic news, but I want to skip on down here and talk about Catalonia, make sure that we get that covered today, because this is just an ugly situation that has happened over there in Spain, and it shows that Spain is basically going back to the abuses of the Franco years. And you need to remember that Catalonia was an independent nation until Franco grabbed it, brought it on in, and said, you're ours now, and you will be Spain, and you won't be Catalonia anymore. So it's not like Catalonia has been a part of Spain for all that long here. But the actions taken by the Spanish government have really raised a lot of eyebrows, and I'm sure the corporate media in the United States is very glad to have a reason not to be reporting on it because it's ugly. Masked government agents were seizing ballot boxes. The Spanish police were abusing voters and just literally stomping on them. And I think Drudge Report had this photo of a Catalan woman. Her face is just drenched with blood. Now, the police were even using grenades, flashbangs, and rubber bullets, trying to keep people from the polling places. And to show you just how tough those Catalonians are, 80% of the polling stations managed to stay open. And the end result for the vote for independence with Spain was 90.09% of the vote. That's pretty much a landslide right there. So basically, Spain is out there trying to say, well, the vote doesn't really count because it runs counter to the goals and ideal of the European Union. It doesn't want to be part of the EU anymore. Just like Great Britain, just like all these other countries, it's turned out to be this raw deal. And again, under the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, all people have a right to peaceful self-determination. If the government that you are currently serving under is not doing a good job for you and the country, you have a right to vote for an independence and just break off and form your own country. That is written into the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and every nation that is a member of the United Nations, including Spain, is required to abide by that. Obviously, many of them are not, such as Ukraine and Iraq. But what really got interesting is in the melee on the day of the referendum, the Catalan police and the Catalan firefighters were going up against the Spanish police that were sent in from outside. This is 1 inch from a civil war. And again, because of the Franco years, a lot of people in Spain remember what civil war really looks like. And my gut is telling me it's going to end up like that, because after Spain sends in outside police to try and quell the independence movement, the next thing will be the military. So it's a very ugly situation. People on the ground were saying they had no idea that the police would be that violent. And they were being knocked down, they were being stomped on, they were being kicked. Even up at the United Nations, they're saying the Spanish attempts to curb the Catalan referendum violate fundamental rights. And yes, they do. Now, all of this, of course, comes down to economics. Catalonia is the economic powerhouse for all of Spain. Spain doesn't want to let it go. Catalonia, on the other hand, is tired of carrying the burden for the rest of the country, just like Germany and Great Britain are tired of carrying the entire load for the European Union. And so the lines are clearly drawn, and interestingly enough, the brutality of the police backfired, because there were a lot of Catalans who were, even at the start of voting, were undecided. And when they saw what the Spanish police were doing to suppress the election, that's when they decided independence. That they could not, in good conscience, continue to live under a government that would use such tactics against its own population. Now, of course, Trump is already out there saying, no, Catalan independence, we must protect the territorial integrity here, because Trump's obviously a globalist. And right now the globalists, like Soros, have to be in a panic. You've got Kurdistan wants to go independent. Crimea broke off. Now Catalonia wants to break off. We're going in the wrong direction. We're supposed to be welding them all together into the New World Order. What's wrong with you people? All right, let's go back up here and pick up the economic news. A lot of good stuff going on here. We were talking about what's going on in Puerto Rico, and one of the things that's really harmed Puerto Rico is massive fraud committed against Puerto Rico by Wall Street bankers. And apparently one of the big perpetrators was Santander Bank, that defrauded investors in Puerto Rico through a massive municipal bond scheme. And Santander was able to pull this off, and nobody went to prison. Have you noticed that about here in the United States of America? Fraudulent bankers are never sent to jail. They may fire some kind of a minor clerk underling. They'll pay a fine that they take off their taxes, and then they raise their fees to their customers. Nothing ever really happens. I think a good idea would be to copy what Vietnam is doing, because they have a former banker that was convicted of fraud. He has been sentenced to death by firing squad. And I think we need a little of that kind of thing here in the United States of America. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Over in Great Britain, Monarch Airlines has just gone into bankruptcy, and it created a huge problem, because apparently there were 110,000 people who had flown out of Great Britain on Monarch Airlines, and now they can't get back. So they're trying to basically get planes sent over there and get all these people back. 300,000 future bookings canceled. Now, as you know, there's a massive unemployment problem in this country. The government won't admit it. They keep insisting it's 5-6% unemployment. We know the numbers are much worse than that. We have almost 100 million Americans willing and able to work who have not been able to find work for months, if not years. So the government's lying about that one. And all this talk about how the immigrants are a benefit, it's a net gain. No, it isn't. The numbers don't bear it out. Huge amount of cost in taxpayer funds, and very little is coming back. And even worse, you know, young American teenagers during this last summer, they wanted to get jobs. That's how you get young people to think about the work ethic, the summer jobs. And apparently American teenagers found themselves competing with immigrants for those jobs and losing out. Now, as you know, Russia has been acquiring physical gold as much as they can. And right now they are holding record reserves, which I'm sure that the U.S. government is gazing on covetously. Remember when they went into Libya and they killed Gaddafi, there was a whole bunch of gold set aside for the gold dinar. That's gone missing. Gosh darn, it was here a couple of minutes ago. I have no idea where it could have gone to. Remember the gold that vanished from the vaults under the World Trade Towers? They were convinced it was still there after the towers came down, and they dug on down and found out the vaults had been emptied. They all want you to think that that ink and paper stuff or that plastic has some kind of value, but when push comes to shove, the money junkies, they want that physical gold. Venezuela is dropping the U.S. dollar. They're actually looking at Bitcoin as a national currency, which would be a major seismic shift in the world of cryptocurrencies. Now, as you know, a lot of people are talking about Trump's tax plan, and that's probably something else that Trump is glad the corporate media is not looking at now, because it's turning out to be another raw deal for the American people. Corporate tax rates are going to be cut from 35% to 20%, and already they're saying, well, the reality is the middle class are probably going to have to pay more taxes. Golly gee shuckies. And the rationale is simple. The rich have enough money to buy the politicians to not tax them more. The poor don't have anything to tax, so of course they're going to go to the middle class here. There's a new report out now saying that Obamacare will be unaffordable for the middle class in 94% of major cities by 2018. The rates keep going up double digits every single year. And latest word out of the Trump administration is they're not even going to look at replace and repeal of Obamacare until sometime next year. So you're stuck with it. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog talking about how the pension crisis is coming to a boil. And everybody was into this whole idea of we're going to have a pension here and a pension there, and it sounded really good. We took some of the burden for retirement off the Social Security system. And they were very popular back when the promises were being kept. But unfortunately, there's a serious problem. And the central banks don't want to admit that they were wrong about this being able to perpetuate. Because so many pensions are in serious, serious trouble. Partly it goes back to the 2008 meltdown of the mortgage-backed security fraud. The other part of it has to go with companies that are now encouraging staff to take early retirement in order to cut staff to deal with declining sales, declining business. And I would say it's also because Americans are living longer, but actually that has now reversed. Over the last 5 years, life expectancy in the U.S. is now in decline. You're all living too long. You're using up too much money. If you're a loyal American, you will drop dead the day after you leave your last job. The world now has 16.5 million millionaires that are currently in possession of $63.5 trillion in combined wealth. This is called wealth inequality. Historically, it is a destabilizer of society when it gets that out of balance. It can lead to economic collapse because all the money is concentrated in one place and there isn't enough in general circulation to power the economy. We're seeing that in this country. Or it reaches a point where it does trigger a revolution, as happened in France. Now, over in Europe, looking at the immigration situation, they've now had to deploy the military to deal with the migrants who are rioting all over the place, and apparently the situation in Copenhagen is now deemed to be out of control. It's just amazing. Apparently, up in Sweden, a migrant from Syria forced a young Swedish woman to identify herself as a whore to his mobile camera, and then, of course, raped her. And they don't want you to think about that because what's a few rapes? We're building the New World Order. It's going to be wonderful. It'll be utopia. No, it won't. George Orwell was bang spot on in predicting what was going to happen when governments got too powerful here. Interestingly enough, over in the Czech Republic, their president, Milos Zeman, has come on out saying that the European Union is acting like the Third Reich, and I can certainly see that. But in this case, the argument is over a chemical used in a popular Czech local rum, saying that Brussels is just tinkering too much in the internal affairs of the member nations. And that, of course, has always rankled the member states of the EU, just as it's rankled the individual separate states here in the United States of America. The federal government was only supposed to take care of issues outside the national borders and not intrude to the inner workings of the states, and yet they continue to have done so. I love the headline on this story. This is out of Gatestone Institute. Switzerland, the hills are alive with the sound of jihad. And apparently they're talking about how Switzerland's Federal Commission Against Racism basically issued an alert saying that hostility toward Muslims was rising, and it's fed by facts that have nothing to do with Muslims themselves. See, we're in the middle of this little propaganda war, where the New World Order people are trying to convince everybody that all these stories of migrants who are raping and looting and no-go zones and everything, that it's all just propaganda by racists who don't want an influx of more refugees. It's Islamophobia. And we have these two competing agendas. And it is, in fact, triggering a surge of nationalism all across Europe, and for that matter, here in the U.S. Let's take a phone call. Jesse in Utah, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I just wanted to relay some information. I was talking to my uncle who lives in Mesquite, Nevada.
Yep.
And he said that his landlady knew the guy that did that shooting, or supposedly did.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he was a big-time liberal, big-time Hillary supporter.
Well, there are photos of him.
Just want to throw that out there.
You know, there are photos of him taking part in an anti-Trump protest, but apparently his Asian paramour was a lot more committed than he was. But again,
well, and I'm just talking as far as, you know, a bunch of old farts sitting down talking politics.
Yeah,
you know
that's where this guy. That's his age bracket.
The mainstream's not going to report that. So.
I think. Let's see. Yeah, I think they did. I think they picked up on the fact that yes, he was liberal, which of course goes against the narrative that it's only those Republican gun nuts who do this kind of thing, which is another reason why I think this guy wasn't the shooter and he wasn't set up to be the patsy. I think he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time and he got killed and dumped there. Because as a propaganda tool,
he's also what helped.
I was
going to say that's what else he was. Oh, sorry, you're cutting out.
Okay. No, I was going to say, as a propaganda tool, there's nothing there. Because he's liberal, they can't use him to demonize the Trumpers. In fact, they've made the Trump people look very sympathetic and look like the victims. And so that whole...
They definitely won't amplify that fact. But that's another thing she was saying is she also agreed that he's definitely not the type to do something like that. He wasn't some sort of extremist, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, have a good day.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Jesse. We're going to let you go here. No, it doesn't pass the smell test. And I don't know what the official story is going to wind up finally being, but at this point, I don't think he did it, and I don't think he was even intended to be set up as the patsy. I think he just was there, and they just dumped it on him, and the real shooters are now gone because, again, if they were going to set up a patsy to be killed and left behind, it would be somebody like a Trumper or somebody linked to Syria or somebody linked to North Korea. There's just nothing there to get anything done with here. All right, let's get on back here. Do you remember how a little while ago there was a church that was shot up in Antioch, Tennessee. And did you notice it didn't get a lot of news coverage? Because the people who were shot in the church were all white, and the shooter is from Sudan and a black power radical with a history of sharing pro-Islamic and anti-Western posts on social media. So again, it doesn't fit the narrative of the whites are killing the blacks here in the United States and they're all being put up. Boy, when it's a white man who shoots up a black church, headline stories for a week. Black man shoots up a white church, who cares? Now, interestingly enough, as you know, the FBI issues a bunch of statistics every year on crimes. All of a sudden, in its latest report, the FBI is starting to withhold specifics, such as what drugs were in use, what guns were in use, whether the arrests were over possession or sale. And I find that very, very interesting. Perhaps they're concerned that the data in the report isn't lining up with the desired narrative as well. We will be right back after these few. Welcome back to our show here. Washington Post is now saying that the Las Vegas shooter had 19 guns. The number keeps changing all over the place here. And so it's, you would think that would be something they'd know. They go in the room, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12. And but the numbers are all over the place here. Getting on back to immigration and problems, apparently over in Malta, they're dealing with a problem that's being brought by the open borders, and apparently drug smuggling Libyan and Somali asylum seekers are causing all kinds of headaches for the Malta police. And apparently a large number of these nationals seeking asylum in Malta are involved in the drug trade and ought to be refused. And as I've said before, this migration is a filtering process. You are not getting the best of the people from those source countries. You're getting the ones who can't make it in their home country. You're getting the ones who are possibly fleeing prosecution. Or you're getting criminals who are seeking to expand their activities. So this unrestricted open borders ideology was crazy right from the beginning. But as I said earlier in the show, conservatives build castles in the clouds and the liberals move in. There's been yet another study done on the World Trade Towers. And basically, again, this is from Scientists for 9/11 Truth, saying that fires could not have collapsed the World Trade Center because if you remember the impacts of the airplanes on the towers, that huge orange flash, that's the jet fuel. The vast majority of the fuel in those aircraft tanks burned outside the building, and the fires inside the building were mostly from paper and office furnishings, and nowhere near hot enough to melt the steel. There's been another very tacky story involving the police in New York. Apparently, an 18-year-old girl is saying 2 New York Police Department officers raped her after arresting her. And apparently 2 detectives and their supervisor have been stripped of their badges and guns, while Internal Affairs is taking a look at that. It almost seems like, as a population, we're all going crazy. Is it prescription antidepressants? I'm sure that's part of the problem. 1/4 of the population and an even larger percentage of police officers are on these medications. And just because you're not out there with an Uzi firing into a crowd doesn't mean it's not affecting you. We did a little study ourselves that showed a strong correlation between the market penetration of antidepressants and the incidence of domestic violence. Are we drugging ourselves into borderline insanity for the sake of a fast buck for the pharmaceutical industries? All right, so let's take a final look at this NFL thing because it does appear to be dying down and going away, and thank goodness for that. But the harm has been done to the NFL, and they appear to have seriously strangled the goose that's been laying all those golden eggs. It was rather amazing to see all these athletes out on the field talking about oppression, and America's a land of oppression, and they're pulling down $5, $10, and $20 million. Last week, 2 weeks ago, NFL ticket sales dropped 18%. They dropped again this last weekend. The owners are now in a panic because if the seats are not being filled, if people are not tuning in to watch the games, they, the owners, have to make up the shortfall for those players' salaries. And so finally the owners are saying, guys, this has got to stop. The fan outrage is so severe, it may be a long time before the NFL ever really recovers. In fact, we may be seeing the beginning of where American-style football goes into a decline, and the United States, like the rest of the world, starts looking more and more at soccer, which the rest of the world calls football. Fox News has announced they will no longer broadcast the national anthem during NFL games, so that they will not be broadcasting whether the players are standing up or sitting down. You're going to get commercials. And after that's all down and the game is ready to start, then they'll come on back to that. I think that's probably a decent way to handle it. I think it's a good solution. Just take away the media exposure. All right, we're going to take another commercial break here. When we come on back, more news about NFL. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And there's a very ugly story floating around here. This came from the Armstrong and Getty radio show. And basically, the Oakland Raiders apparently were very upset. They were all kneeling for the anthem, and the star quarterback stood, showing respect to the anthem and the flag. And apparently the front line were so upset with him that they purposely held back and let him get tackled. And in the process, they wound up losing the game. If I were the owner of the Oakland Raiders, I would be very upset about that because you're there to win. It really is absurd. A little bit of fallout from Catalan's independence vote. It has revived calls for Scotland to have a new independence referendum, and this time they're going to be really watching for election fraud, because remember the last one they had was almost like they didn't even try and hide the fraud that was going on. So, what a mess the world is in here. Getting on back to the Las Vegas shooting. As you know, Hillary was out there already saying we must put politics aside, and then immediately launches into the liberal agenda for gun control. And as I mentioned, she put out this tweet saying that, boy, if he'd had a silencer, there would have been a lot more people who were dead. And I explained why the movie image of a silencer, it doesn't exist in real life. There is no tube that you can put on the end of a firearm that is going to make it quiet. And the correct term for the device is a suppressor. And the goal of a suppressor is to take the single shock wave that comes out of the barrel when the bullet leaves and turn it into lots of little shock waves, which make it very, very difficult to pinpoint where the shot came from by listening for it. There's also another effect of that. When you talk about hearing that is damaged by gunfire, the sound of gunfire rather, it is that shock wave. For people who are not wearing the appropriate ear protection, and if you're a shooter, you ought to be, it can cause permanent damage over time. So, believe it or not, the House of Representatives is looking at a new bill that would basically deregulate the use of suppressors, and it's called the Hearing Protection Act. And it will eliminate restrictions on suppressors and treat them as just another part of an ordinary firearm. And so that's the reason for Hillary's comment. And it actually would be a good thing, because a suppressor is going to mean that you're still going to hear the gun, but the sound of that shockwave blast is not going to be potentially as damaging to your hearing. I think it's a good idea. And again, you need to remember this idea that a silencer can really silence a gun, that's movie-making magic. It doesn't exist in real life. The closest you can get is a suppressor with what is called subsonic ammunition, which is very weak, which means that the bullet is traveling slower than the speed of sound. There's no way to stop the shock wave from a bullet that's traveling faster than Mach 1. There's no way to do that. Now, over in Vermont, they're taking a look at how health is run in this country. And they're getting ready to try a new experimental model in which doctors will be paid to keep patients healthy, and if the patients become ill, the money to the doctors stops. And this can be very effective because Vermont is not the first place to think up this idea. It actually used to be the cornerstone of Chinese medical practice before they got all civilized. And that was the idea that if you had a doctor, you would pay them monthly a small fee as long as you were healthy. And if you got sick, the doctor was obligated to cure you. And until he cured you, the money would stop. And that certainly gets around this idea of doctors making profits off of endless treatments for symptoms. It puts the financial incentive on health and wellness rather than the cultivation of additional diseases here. Now, over in San Diego, they're dealing with hepatitis A. They've had 17 people dead, mostly among the homeless population. San Diego has declared a state of emergency, and people are wondering, is this really a state of emergency or another vaccine sales campaign? Certainly, the homeless cannot afford to get the vaccines. That's basically, it's all scaring you into buying things you otherwise wouldn't get here. Let's take a phone call. Craig in Seattle. Aloha, Craig. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. I had a quick question for you, if you don't mind. Have you heard this about 30 years ago? William Cooper stating this is actually how they're going to destroy this country with drugs and mass shootings and blame it on basically our rights, the Constitution and everything to basically get rid of us, get rid of the country in itself.
Well,
the idea of this country.
Yeah, William Cooper's not the only person who said that. I mean, there have been a lot of people coming on out and saying that when the government wants to get rid of the Second Amendment, they're going to be staging all kinds of mass shootings until the American people say, save me from the evil mass shooters and take away our guns and take care of me. But just something to keep in mind, people. Every genocide of the 20th century was preceded by a gun ban on that targeted population. Just like the U.S. tries to disarm all the nations that it eventually wants to invade, same thing down on a personal level.
Thank you, Mike. You all do a great job out there. Have a great day. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. All right, turning to the world of computers, apparently Sonic Drive-In got hacked and customer credit card info was stolen and sold on the Internet. BlackBerry is changing its business model. They're moving away from the handset market because it's already glutted. And instead, they're trying to take their proprietary security software and market it to other providers, such as Apple and Samsung. And BlackBerry's revenue is in a bit of a decline, but they expect it will pick up as they get out of the hardware end of the business and just license their software. Apparently, Denuvo, the world's most feared gaming anti-piracy mechanism, was deployed on the brand new Total War Warhammer 2. And apparently the hackers had gotten past it and started making pirated copies within hours. There's never going to be a technological solution to the idea of software or content piracy. In fact, by trying to do it through software and hardware, you're turning it into a game. And the hackers are going to love that. You know, which one of us is more butch with the computer console? The problem isn't the computers, it's that we as a nation have lost our moral compass. And the attitude for people seems to be that if I can get away with something, there's no reason for me not to do it, whether it's ransomware or stealing movies or stealing music or the rest of that. It's just people don't have those moral inhibitions. And again, look at the example being set by our government and corporate leaders. It's got to be very hard for young people growing up in our age to get a sense of moral responsibility and rightness looking at the country's leadership. And we know that religion, part of what it does that is good, is to instill moral values, but religion is in decline, pretty much all across the board. And I'm sure all the clergy sex abuse stories have not helped with that either. Now, Amazon's Whole Foods Market has been hit with a credit card breach in some stores. Another day to breach here. And so apparently they were able to gain unauthorized access to credit card information for the customers who made purchases of certain venues like tap rooms and full table restaurants located within the store. So it wasn't a complete breach of the entire system. And apparently most of what they actually got were transaction histories rather than the credit card information. Here's something you need to think about, okay? You can't hack cash. And until the government is able to deal effectively and decisively with cybercrime, it has no business pushing the cashless society propaganda. They have no right to force us onto these plastic monetary instruments when they are wide open for theft and fraud. We need to go back to cash and carry. Go to the supermarket and you'll see somebody who's buying groceries, loaf of bread, bottle of wine, some chips, some candy, and they're putting it on a credit card, not a debit card, a credit card, where the bank gets interest on it. And even on a debit card, there's a charge. The bank isn't doing that for free. Shouldn't be using the bank, for these minor things. That's what cash is for. More and more people are starting to look at the iPhone X, and they're very uncomfortable with the concept of the Face ID. Now, Apple wanted to move forward with better security because it's already been shown their fingerprint scanner can be fooled. If somebody can get your fingerprint off of something, doorknob, whatever, they can make up a fake that will fool the Apple fingerprint scanner. So Apple came out with this infrared imaging system that literally makes a depth map of your face. It's not a photograph of your face. It's a true three-dimensional representation of your face, and they're saying that the only way somebody could get past it is to literally have a casting, a life mask of your face, like they do for special effects makeup. The problem is, as was demonstrated during the unveiling, sometimes it won't even let the phone's rightful owner get on in there. So, I mean, the best idea is don't have anything on that iPhone or that iPad or that smart device that you wouldn't want to be made public. And it is amazing how many people, especially young people, are putting their entire lives on these devices or on social media, and they don't understand the repercussions. There are nasty people out there. Now, there's an alarming story coming out of Harvard. They're looking at this issue of vulnerability on government websites, and they have discovered that hackers could acquire enough personal information to alter voter registration files in 35 states. Now, this study, which surveyed official state voter record websites, found that in 35 states plus the District of Columbia, voter registration websites allow users to log on and change information like home addresses, party affiliation, and gender. And while this provides a convenient way for voters to update their registration, it also gives malicious actors an easy way to impersonate voters, submit address changes, delete voter registrations, or request absentee ballots. And this definitely needs to go to President Trump's Commission on Voting Integrity, because it is a scandal how wide open for fraud our election system is. Now, there are some newly released documents called the Monsanto Papers, and they provide a behind-the-scenes look at how far Monsanto will go to control public perception, the news media, and even scientific research into the key ingredient in its Roundup product, glyphosate. And these documents, which include internal emails and memos, reveals, among other things, how Henry L. Miller, a Robert Wesson Fellow in Scientific Philosophy and Public Policy at the Hoover Institute at Stanford University, allowed Monsanto to ghostwrite an editorial he published in Forbes.com and claimed for his own. And the editorial attacked the decision by the International Agency for Research on Cancer to classify glyphosate as a probable carcinogen. So this is how corrupt our entire society has become, and why you should never accept the word of any authority figure as being factual, accurate, or true. It's all for sale. Look at how many scientists were willing to whore their principles and sell out to the global warming agenda in exchange for just a little funding. Now, despite all of this effort on the part of Monsanto, the European Parliament has banned Monsanto lobbyists from their parliament after the company refused to attend a hearing into allegations that it had interfered with safety studies. And I think that's definitely a good thing for Monsanto's lobbyists to be held at a distance. France has already decided they're going to phase out glyphosate by 2022. They're very, very concerned about all these adverse health issues and the fact that we're not going to get a straight story from Monsanto, and we're not going to get a straight story from the FDA, and we're not going to get a straight story from the USDA. This is a bizarre story. We all know little kids sometimes like to stick things in various orifices. It's one of the reasons when you go to buy a toy, it'll have an age on there, 1 plus up, 2 plus, because basically they're trying to make sure that toys with small parts aren't given to children too young to understand. You ought not to put that up your nostril. So apparently there was this guy who thought he had cancer, and the doctors operated to remove the tumor, and what they found instead was not a tumor, but a toy traffic cone that apparently was in his body for 40 years. This was published in the British Medical Journal. And they're saying this is the first instance of a foreign object being in the body overlooked for such a long time, which tells you that all of the doctors weren't really doing a very good job for those 40 years, were they? More concerns being raised about fluoride. The journal Environmental Health Perspectives published a study, Prenatal Fluoride Exposure and Cognitive Outcomes in Children at 4 and 6 to 12 years of age in Mexico, basically looking at a correlation between prenatal exposure to fluoride in the drinking water and potential health concerns. And the researchers called the study one of the first and longest longitudinal epidemiological studies to exist that either address the association of early life exposure to fluoride to childhood intelligence or study the association of fluoride and cognition using individual biomarkers of fluoride exposure. The study was funded in part by the U.S. National Institutes of Health. Already we are seeing cities like North Texas North Texas is urging the Dallas City Council to halt fluoridation due to this study showing that fluoride exposure damages IQ. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Last segment of our program today. Over at Zero Hedge, they've got this interesting article. A group of mostly liberal mental health experts have penned out an anti-Trump hit piece that basically blames Trump for the national mental health crisis. And basically, these experts claim is hurting anyone who disagrees with Trump policies in general. Now, first of all, this nation has had a mental health crisis for long before Trump came into office. And I tend to think that the national mental health crisis is a combination of therapists who see all normal human behaviors as an illness requiring treatment, coupled with the side effects of these prescription psychiatric medications that were given to treat us of things like our desire to eat healthy food. Believe it or not, that's been defined as a mental illness, orthorexia nervosa. Now, Professor Ivar Gaivar, the 1973 Nobel Prize winner for physics, is out there saying global warming is pseudoscience, and we are continuing to see more and more indications that we're nearing the end of the current solar grand maximum. We're heading into a grand solar minimum. This is when the highs and lows of all the overlapping solar cycles line up. And in all probability, we're going to start seeing the beginnings of a new mini ice age. But Al Gore is still out there saying, global warming, carbon dioxide, you've got to give me money. But apparently, data from the Danish Meteorological Institute is showing record Arctic sea ice growth in September. It's already greater than the same date in 2007, 2008, 2010, 2011, 2012, and 2015. In other ways, it's the fourth highest extent in the last 10 years. And we've already seen, we're getting snow. We were getting snow at the end of September. Another article out here, new scientific evidence that climate change is not only occurring on Earth, but on Pluto and Mars. Well, yeah, climate changes naturally. Don't need humans to do it. We were seeing that back on the Viking days when people were talking about temperature variations on Earth. We were seeing the same thing on Mars. Because the temperature of the solar system is controlled by that giant ball of fusing hydrogen right at the middle. Very alarming article coming out of Investment Watch blog. Universities are now rejecting all scientific research they deem to be politically incorrect, no matter how good the science. And this is going on back to this psychotherapist named James Caspian, who wanted to study people who wanted to undo their gender reassignment. And it was deemed politically incorrect, and the university, Bath Spa University, just shut it down. They rejected the proposal. It's politically incorrect. It's going to hurt people to talk about detransitioning. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. I got to talk to Jim Goddard up there in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. He's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. And please take what you learn here and share it with everyone that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.